All right, so I got to record this quick little video ahead of the show to say sorry to Paul and Catherine for taking so long to get this out. I recorded this episode with Paul Bessier of Coterie, about their SimplyBind, 2 data points to binding about 2 months ago. But our startup world's been a little crazy, so we're getting this out to you now. I think it's a really cool summary of the way that we can use information, the way that eventually I think we'll be kind of like marketing reps describing risks instead of like data gatherers. I think Coterie's had some cool directions. And then we also get into Paul's background of, kind of Moneyball and sports gambling and how he saw the way statistics was playing out 10, 20 years ago in sports, happening right now in insurance. It's a really cool, unique episode. Again, sorry guys for the delay. And then I'll be at ITC next week, so it's fun to get this out. Actually recording this about a week out on Tuesday, Wednesday, if anybody wants to say hello. But I hope you enjoy this Insurance Nerds episode about Coterie SimplyBind. Go check it out if you haven't yet. Thank you to their team for always being available and excellent, and catch you soon. Hey guys, Broker Brett, back with Paul Bessier from Coterie to talk a little data today. And I heard what we have the SimplyBind experience is coming out for you guys as well. A reason to kind of hop on, make some noise together. Thanks for joining me, Paul.
For sure, yeah. Thanks, thanks for having me on. We launched a big product, a new release that is intended to really expedite the quote to bind experience within Coterie, which only requires answering 2 questions: what's your business name and address that you're trying to quote for our small commercial space, and within about 20 seconds, due to some data and some automated underwriting written by about 100 years worth of underwriting experience, we get to a point where we can bind a quote. So it's a really exciting time. This is a big step. It's not the last step, but it's a big step in the maturation of our Coterie.
You guys are just feeding into my talking head, ideas of us basically becoming marketing reps at one point, and that data just being available to kind of be in the background to verify what we're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and data, and I'm run data at Coterie, and data can impact us in so many different ways. But insurance has been one of the first and largest consumers of data forever, but it's how you use it that really matters. And it's always been leveraged in the underwriting process. Now we're just bringing that all up front and just making sure that it can be leveraged from many, many different sources as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always go back to Tony Kanye saying underwriters are default no and insurance agents are default yes. Yeah. We're out there looking for things to sell, looking for things to write. How can I get it done? And like, should I take this restaurant that, the servers are wearing sandals and, there's no, coverage over the kitchen? The underwriter's actually looking at, what's going on. So it's pretty cool to think about you guys doing that with data and saying, hey, yeah, this looks like it's what's supposed to be. We found C records, we found, tax records. I'm not sure what pools of data you guys dive into, but hey, this is a real business. This has been there. They look profitable. Let's do it. Let's bind their business. Or, somebody's pulling a fast one. Somebody's using this code when there's no record of this being X. Let's pump the brakes. Let's see why, they're trying to push this through.
In our testing for this product, we've seen several hookah bars that were classified as restaurants and gun shops that were sporting goods stores. So I get it, right? And we're not trying necessarily to say no, though I totally understand your point. One of the things that's really interesting about what we're doing and kind of this analysis, if you look at NAICS 6-digit codes, talk about industries, right? When you talk about our appetite, it's about 300 codes that are an appetite for us. 215 of those or so of them, like if we see that the industry is, X, that we're totally cool, 1-to-1, and we will push it through and we'll be able to at least rate it. But the other 85, with what we're doing in data now in the SimplyBind, the other 85 used to not really be open, that now we can open up because there's minutia involved, right? Now we know whether a landscaper is really a landscaper or a tree trimmer, and we can really dig into that. And one of the things I should confirm here and thank the agent, our agents and our partners in the process, everybody who uses our system is helping us get smarter, right? The value of data and technology is not necessarily what you do day one. It's how you continue to improve over time. And so we're never quite binding anything until the agent always sees at the end what data was used and the impact that it had on the overall policy.
Oops, sorry about that. I had myself muted for a second. I was gonna say it's a feedback loop. It's a business partner loop. And I don't think anyone's necessarily trying to like pull a fast one, and like Coterie's not trying to say no necessarily. We're all working together, kind of build a conversation of, how we classify people properly, how we rate them properly, how we have the monies there to pay the right kind of claims when they come up. Because that's the other thing too. You're trying to insure it in case something happens. So you got to make sure you're insuring the right thing to take care of everyone on the backside too.
The whole point is that we want the premium to represent appropriate coverage. Everybody wins if that's the case, right?
Yeah, exactly. Pooled risk in case something catastrophic happens, and you have your actuarial tables of the likelihood of having this, issue to restaurants X, whereas a hookah bar that has a bunch of coals around and a bunch of lighters and everything else that can go on in there, there's probably a little bit higher, risk level.
Restaurants don't want to be thrown into the same pool as those. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And having worked in restaurants, I'm always impressed. Like, the cut glove does get used a lot. They do clean regularly. The cooks are really impressive. Not only should they get credit for their cooking skills, but they really handle things in the background too. So I was on your LinkedIn ahead of time, and I saw a little bit of a sports crossover as well. And not that people don't want to talk insurance. Obviously, we like talking insurance. So it's probably a little easier to rope somebody into a sports data conversation, I would think.
Well, and I mean that's basically what the first 20 years of my career was. So I'll give a little bit of background there, and I'll try to draw some correlations to why I think it's incredibly exciting what we, not just Coterie, but we as, commercial insurance or we as an industry are doing now with data. So yeah, for about 15 to almost 20 years, when you add in some consulting, my career was predictive analytics in sports. And if you're doing the exact math on that and trying to look back to see when Moneyball happened, which was a movie with Brad Pitt that represented the 2004 Oakland A's. Yes, I was doing the same stuff as Moneyball.
Awesome.
When Moneyball was happening. Yeah, and there were kind of two big takeaways in terms. And so worked in that for a while, and helped to try to innovate and change the industry there. Did to a degree with a couple companies that I personally started and was able to exit. Knew David McFarland, our CEO, knew some of the people who were part of Coterie, and really ultimately was sold on a couple of things as it relates to the direct ties between sports and insurance. One, if 2004 was Moneyball for sports, I think 2021, 22 right now is Moneyball for insurance. We have the large sample. We have that sample size, critical mass of information. Now it's about pairing that with technology and finding places that where there's market inefficiencies, and not necessarily exploiting them, but improving them, optimizing for them. And one of the things that I did in sports that's a direct tie to thinking about the actuarial world versus thinking about the sports, and in this case sports gambling world, is that the technology that had previously been built, and always the technology that had existed for in-game sports wagering, trying to determine during a game who's most likely to win, team X or Y.
So wild. Yeah.
That had always been, let's take the entire history of the sport and compare it to this exact scenario. So if there's like 3rd down and 10 with two teams playing against each other and the home team's up by 10, and it's the 4th quarter with 12 minutes left, how often does the home team go on to win? That's the scenario. All right. That was 62% of the time. That's what was used. Well, that's very similar to what actuaries tend to do when they come up with their tables relative to like the last 3 years or the last, whatever that critical mass or that large sample set is, because you're pooling risk, because you're looking for homogenous sets. And I get that. I totally understand that perspective. What we did with the technology in sports that now we're applying to Coterie is to really hone in on the exact policy itself. And to do that, we're leveraging external data. What I did in sports was to say, okay, yeah, cool, but what if it's the Packers playing the Jaguars, or the Patriots playing the Packers, or something?
5 days rest versus 3 days rest.
All that matters is actually it's exactly right. All that matters is these two teams that are playing against each other right now. Nothing else really matters other than that. And at any given point, we were able to, with at least the technology that I previously built, simulate from that point forward with just those players involved, and the weather and the crowd and the other factors. Well, that's exactly the same thing that SimplyBind is now doing behind the scenes, which is, let's figure out all of the potential contributors to risk, and that might be, or the opposite, contributors to being less risky, that could be present for this one policy, and appropriately rate and identify that policy. So I think insurance is really sexy, because having lived in sports forever, I can now just be a fan of the sports side, and take that same knowledge and apply it directly to what we're doing here.
So I'll call it my broker brain, liberal arts brain, just reflecting and riffing. A restaurant, it's called a chicken house restaurant in California, Texas, or Florida is going to have catastrophic related issues, is going to have whatever else, versus a restaurant in Utah or Wyoming that's in a fairly temperate part of the state. And so we're not looking at Plato's chicken house in a vacuum. We're looking at Plato's chicken house on the coast. We're looking at Plato's chicken house next to brush. We're looking at Plato's chicken house, and then that's cool. And I see where you're taking it from the micro, to the micro from the macro.
And we can do that without needing an exorbitant amount of underwriters, because we have underwriters who are teaching our system and writing the rules that the data then, that the data feeds into. So everything we do is still, what's called a heuristic or business rules that our underwriters are actually doing, but we don't need hours upon hours of underwriter time for every policy to look through and I confirm all of that because of different data vendors, to your point that you had from earlier, that we're pulling in.
And then you guys recently launched in New York. And then did you guys never mind. There's something I shouldn't bring up because I'm not sure if it's public. I'll ask later. But you're already spread out, which is great too, from an actuarial standpoint or from a risk pool standpoint. That way, kind of diversified. You don't want to get too stuck in one corner in this industry.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, so we call it 51 and done. We're in every state in the United States, as well as DC. So we've got the entire country covered, which is the beauty, and it does allow us to diversify pretty significantly, and it works with our carriers then as well, of course.
So I was just making a note. I was like, DC, do I need to double check back on DC? Got to check out the actual rules of that municipality. No, it's fun. I think small business is great. I think looking at the location by location is super interesting. And it is about getting more specific, more competitive, having a competitive edge. Have you seen the actuarial side of the group kind of be excited to talk to the data scientist side? And then are the data scientists, appreciative of the history of the actuarial side, or is it a little bit more combative, or a little bit of both? I
mean, it's a good question. We're still a startup. We have, we're approaching 200 employees, but there still isn't a very clear divide there. It's really interesting. We intentionally, to directly answer your question, we intentionally built our team with about half of the people having insurance experience and half not. I don't. Aside from
I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I spent 4 years from 18 to 22 interning over the summers technically at an insurance company.
Western and Southern. Yeah, we actually.
Western Southern, yeah.
That's at the house Fineo. We have one of their products out. We like them. They're cool. Yeah,
exactly. But outside of that, I mean, that's almost 20 years ago, and actually more than 20 years ago in some cases. But so we have people who don't come from insurance, and we have people who do. We have people who came from large companies. We have people about 50-50 large companies versus startups, or kind of more the entrepreneurial route. It really helps us with diversity of thought. Now, the mantra the entire time has been leverage data and data science to automate underwriting, which inherently also pulls in and pulls forward about 30% of what actuarial science is, because there is a big overlap between predictive analytics and actuarial work. So I would say that I don't feel as though there's a significant disconnect there. The only thing that, because we have kind of mutual understanding of the overall objective. The only thing that I think that is really interesting is, we still have our carriers and our reinsurers and investors who know the insurance world, who are still expecting certain reserving practices, certain reporting, certain bordereau. We can't neglect the entire industry by any means, even if we're trying to think of things in a different way.
That's interesting. I hadn't seen that hat, and that definitely feels like, I'll call it like a CEO level problem, trying to get the traditional stakeholders on board while trying to court like the new activity and new business. No, that's cool. I'm a broker. I feel like a guinea pig and all these things. I just have fun touching the projects and trying to give feedback. And from the broker seat, we're trying to get things off our desk, trying to get a yes or no, trying to place business, trying to not keep everybody mad at us, try to write business that lets you sleep well at night, so it's cool that you guys are kind of keeping the simple things simple, taking care of small business, being efficient, because that's where things are going to start too. I mean, you guys are going to grow and develop, the agents are going to grow up and develop, the accounts will grow. So it's a way to kind of, I'll call it, grab the business and give your Main Street agent a chance to compete with like embedded solutions that are out there, or point and click, or just ease of purchase. If one guy's going to give me an 8-page supplemental and it's going to be 3 or 4 back and forths to get it done versus the other guy just needs a couple data points.
And for like a $300 policy too, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. Like the whole, you figured it out, or at least you touched on the exact concept here, which is we are still very much agent and through distribution via agents driven. And this product is explicitly intended to make things as easy as possible for independent agents to be able to compete in this world, and pay attention to it, because it is generally an underserved market, because it's not that compelling to go jump into when the premiums and ultimately the commissions are relatively low. But if we can get you to aid an agent to be able to get through the whole process in 20 seconds, and it's a legit, and it has everything you need, and it has the coverage you want, and you can interact with your small business owner fairly quickly in the process, then that seems like the win. See, speed, simplicity, and service is what we're competing on. Price, we should be in line, if not below most, because we're able to cut out a lot of our costs. But at a minimum, we want to help agents win with speed, simplicity, and service.
And then I'm going to put my my talking head hat on real quick. I think for the small independent guy that's competing with like the Geicos and Progressive of the world that have $1 billion out there, if I can do somebody's personal lines and they have me a small business owner, and Coterie makes it easy for me to write the business insurance. And then Fineo has been a company I've been involved with for a bunch of years now. Really cool agent driven life insurance chassis. If I had their home and auto, I'm like, hey, by the way, like I grabbed your data from our home and auto. Like, I saw you guys just bought a $750,000 home. I could use my Western Southern income replacement product for $100,000 for the next 20 years, just to make sure, heaven forbid, anything happens, it'll be cheaper than term. So I get that home and auto. Maybe I bought the lead. Maybe I sell that life insurance, and that actually makes me profitable year one. And I have that. Oh, wow, you're a small business owner. That's great. You have a landscaping company. Let me hop over to Coterie real quick. Here you go. I think the InsurTech tools are really going to help the little independent guys, just guys and gals, just kind of round out accounts, protect it, just keep being profitable and having fun too. It's fun talking about small business. I'm happy to do personal lines, but small business
especially in the concept of the greater good then too, right? And if the relationships matter, the relationship with the owner of the business, who also is an individual, right? In these cases is incredibly valuable, right, for the agent. And I could throw some stats your way. We'll nerd out for a second. A little over 40% of all of our quotes come from residential addresses, even though they're small businesses.
That's cool.
About 65% of the companies that have ever quoted with us are 1 to 2 person companies. So we have a lot of sole props. And you think about it now, we were technically launched during the pandemic. We launched basically right at the beginning of the pandemic. And there were a lot of, small businesses that started up in people's homes. It makes total sense. And so those numbers will probably go down to a point you were alluding to earlier, as we also get higher and higher and higher mix of our business, proving ground though being at this point. But, we've established that niche and established a product that really fits what we're seeing more of than ever right now. And that is people who are starting their individual small businesses in their homes.
Yeah. And then I just wrote an article about it. I, lost a sales job 4 years ago and decided to go independent and kind of cobble together projects. I think people are seeing interesting stability in entrepreneurship these days too. Big companies are trying, it's hard for everybody, definitely in a different time right now. But I think a lot of people are excited to go stand up their own shingle, and kind of put themselves out there, see what they can make happen. If you can make insurance easy, it's like your city license, your state license, your insurance, learning how to do taxes, finding the right CPA, your marketing, your networking, hopefully add a little bit of a fee time ahead of time, knowing your product. Insurance is, the way I feel about it, most people, they want to pay as least as possible and they want to do what it's supposed to do. That's as far as their concern is,
They want to trust that it does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a two-way street, like we're saying. If you're given the appropriate, revenue numbers, if you're given the appropriate class code, if you're not trying to be too tricky or cute with your insurance, it should usually be able to help you out too.
And thinking about that from the agent's perspective, that one of the things that we're doing is not just making that faster and easier for the agent. We're also helping to keep those numbers in check, because we have other data sources that are telling us roughly around how many employees, what should the size of this business, what do we expect it to be. At which point then it's easier for us to ensure both to ourselves but also to the agent that the coverage is appropriate as well.
And I think you all can get there. So I'm not speaking Coterie in specific, but I
Yeah.
have been on your platform. I've been in other platforms that kind of feed you the data as well. I'll give it like generally like a 80%, not just Coterie, but in general, it gets you close enough. And then if you're not trying to be too aggressive on the premium side, you're going to be close. I mean, you're going to be definitely good enough. It kind of reminds me, in life insurance, they're pulling some info from like the MIB, from other databases that it gets people close enough. And sometimes if the premium's lower, that ease is worth it. Maybe you're paying 10% more, not saying that's the case or isn't the case, or 20%, but just to get it done rather than 2 weeks in a paramed, people, sometimes elect those pass-through processes.
Yeah, and I mean, and for our average premium is about $1,200. We're seeing with this tool, it's going to be a little bit more. So plus or minus 10% matters to us more than it usually matters to the agent, right? Because for us, it matters because we're then comparing that to loss ratios, and on the aggregate, that might matter. But for the agent and for the small business owner, they want to know that they're covered. And we can get that to you very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, as I was saying, on our side too, we want people to be healthy. We want your reinsurers to be healthy. We want you guys to be healthy. Like, we want everything to do what it's supposed to do.
The machine.
Yeah, exactly. It's I just think it keeps the wheels turning. I always joke that I like insurance because, like, I think you can do it genuine good when you do it right. Taking care of people, we're protecting them, make sure they have coverage when they need it, and you can do really well, monetarily. And if you write good policies with good carriers that can take care of clients, even if there's a claim, knock on wood, they should be with you for a really long time. It's cool. It's definitely like a farming relationship industry. It's not, I don't think it's like a hunting, killing industry as much, And
I'm fine with that. You mentioned my LinkedIn. I talk about this all the time. Like, my LinkedIn says nerd, 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 nerd. All I believe in any success that I may or may not have, or I may have achieved over time, I view as a relationship game, right?
Cool.
It's how do you foster like collaborative or a collaborative environment or something really, with partners, with, whether it's business partners or it's external partners or with coworkers. How do you identify and maximize kind of the value that everybody can bring? And, and in a way that keeps people happy and keeps people, genuinely engaged. And if you can do that at the agent level, and if we can make that easy for you, perfect.
It's cool that you have built and exited your own company before. It sounds like it's awesome to infuse that, entrepreneurship into a young, growing, getting big company, that kind of well-roundedness. Past life, I sold office moves and I took over like the CEO's territory as like a 40% in office, maybe it would flex up to like 200-person company, but he was super paranoid. He was always thinking about things in like a 360-degree fashion. And then my dad was the top salesman. He's like, I don't care, just get the deal. And I think he like rubbed off on me too much, where I'm overly paranoid. After hanging out with him for like 6 years, I almost think like an underwriter. I feel really good about my own book of business if I shoot myself in the foot and like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's funny. That's very cool. Well, we've done good though. We've I think we're 20 minutes in. We haven't nerded out on sports too hard or anything. Even though
we haven't talked too much about like the trajectory of Jaylen Brown or
or Giannis just controlling the game, doing whatever he wants right now. I grew up, I'm 37. I joke kind of right next to Gen Xers. I joke that I'm like a Paul Bunyan learning how to wield like a steam powered axe that is data and automation. The cohort right behind me, those guys are awesome, just scraping things, automating marketing, doing really cool things we haven't thought of.
There's a point I want to make on that though, if you don't mind, because I want to dive into this that is very apparent to me, at least in commercial, maybe not necessarily applicable in personal lines, very similar to what you're just talking about. From 2004 to about 2019, I had predicted models out in the market for almost every sport: baseball, basketball, football, hockey, soccer, horse racing, all that was out there. All this stuff that I was doing, never had more than 6 employees working on these models, and we're still able to automate every game. And I'm not looking for credit there. What I'm saying is, and the models up until around 2019 were beating any other predictive models that were out there. And we didn't use anything besides box score information. And for anybody that's out there,
that's interesting.
And we're pulling in box score, it's how you leverage the data. It doesn't have to be that sophisticated. And box scores are publicly available in the public domain information that no one owns. And what's really interesting about that is we're doing the exact same thing in insurance right now. Commercial insurance needs to get that part right, the box score information, the public information. And so all the really cool nerdy stuff that I love to get excited about, that I think you were just talking about getting excited about, that can get into like, telematics or, terabytes upon terabytes of information in sports. Back in 2006, some of that existed. There was what's called pitch effects and sport view, where every spin of every ball and basketball you evaluate. Nobody knew how to use it for 15 years. And it's the same kind of thing now. We can capture the information. I'm a fan of capturing as much data as we possibly can that could be applicable. But right now, the industry still needs to get the box score information right. It's like, it's not the super sophisticated stuff that we just need to make sure we have it, it's accurate, and we're leveraging it correctly. Then we can build on top of it.
So I'm going to use a real simple example, then maybe plug a friend's company. Your fire line score plus your feet to the ocean plus, hazard hub, like, is there a fire hydrant near your building? Like those three things. If you're checking those boxes, like, okay, we'll ensure that structure. It's probably not going to light on fire. It's probably not going to flood. And there's a fire.
For what it's worth, we get that data from Hazard Hub, and we leverage it in exactly what we're doing. So you're right.
I see what you're saying. And then buildings. Is this a 1940 built ramshackle that looks like it's never been updated on stilts on the ocean, or is this built by a contractor less than 20 years ago in the middle of a strip mall? Yes, no.
Exactly. Yeah, it matters.
Do or do not go ahead.
Stuff that either of us could know, and with a couple quick Google searches, we're just pulling it all together right now and automating it.
Yeah, so to overly simplify it, you're looking at city records, you're looking at history, and like you're just creating kind of green light, red lights. If it's like green, 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 all right, cool, let's bind it up. If it's it's so funny. A lot of it is kind of simple. It is like what you would do if you pivot it back to a person. If you handed somebody this stack of papers on their desk, they knew what to check for.
Well, so I mean, that you say that as an analogy, that's almost exactly what we did. We sat and do sit continuously. It's not just me; it's the whole data team and data scientists are sitting with underwriters, looking for now at what information is of interest to them initially. As we evolve, we will pull in more and more information, and we will build more around some modeling that allows us to better understand how our claims are associated with the risks that we take on. But for now, we have underwriters, and that's all trained by underwriters. We have underwriters really focusing on exactly what you mentioned. It's like, hey, what would you go do if you had to do this one policy, so that we can code it so you can watch 200 policies do the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, I consider myself like, learned sales from baby boomers, just grew up with basketball being pretty physical. Even, we're talking how I met David basically through virtual poker during COVID. And I was joking that with all the actuaries and numbers guys, I had the little, hand percentages written out. So you've been a numbers guy, I've been a statistics guy, I follow sports. I kind of joke, I'm in Vegas, I'm like running out of money. I can go to the $1-2 like no limit game and just like wait and just pick stuff up. Yeah. How much credit do you still give like X factors and instincts, and the guy or gal in the corner has been doing it for 30 years, so like the statistics are there, the data's there. Do you give some credence to the kind of yeah, or do they have that built into their own personal computer? Exactly. They don't realize what they're doing.
You're about to make, you just made the point that I'll make. Whenever I talk about data science, I have a presentation that includes pictures of what I would refer to as old crusty white guys. Doyle Brunson's on that picture.
That's funny.
And for the audience, I'll explain that in a second. Bill Belichick's on that picture, and Warren Buffett's in that picture, and a few others. And the point is, the reason that I got so excited about data science, back in 2004, again, not the only one that was doing that, and definitely not the only one that was doing that as applied to sports, is because I realized, I'll tell you the exact moment. I listened to an interview with a guy who took over as GM of the Cincinnati Reds, and he spent 45 minutes talking about every single hard step where he never got paid, and where he had to grind, and where he had to get lucky just to make it into that one position. The dude's like 57 years old. And I listened to this entire thing, and I'm 21 at the time, 22. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to wait that long to be able to have an influence over something that I'm interested in. And so I respect that dude. Wayne Cribbs is the guy's name. I didn't mean to keep him off the to bury that. But I respect Doyle Brunson. I respect Bill Belichick. Doyle Brunson, one of the greatest poker players of all time. Bill Belichick, probably almost objectively the greatest football coach of all time. But they got where they are from sitting at that table or watching film over and over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
With technology and data, you can skip a bunch of steps.
Yeah.
Get to sit understanding similar probabilities that they inherently know or that they understand in their computer. Because all the data science is trying to it's trying to leverage information to make smart decisions. It's what we all do thousands of times a day. It's just now we have an objective, non-biased way to do it.
Well, because even as I joke around about that, like I've one of 3 brothers. My dad would take us to Vegas as soon as we turned 21 for March Madness. Like, we had like a felt poker table since I was like 11, so as much as I'm joking about going there, like shooting from the hip, I've been cold calling for that moving company I worked at for 6 years since I was like 18. Yeah. Lance a joke that I'm playing around with InsurTech insurance 16 hours a day. My wife's got to pull me away. Yes, I mean, as much as I joke that I'm intuiting, like you said, it's reps. All this is just kind of reps and experience. And but what you're saying is you can kind of intuit early if you know what numbers you're looking at and why.
You can skip some steps. I mean, this was 04, and 04 was to get super nerdy and into the weeds on the poker reference, was the big poker boom with Chris Moneymaker, the World Series of Poker. We're just like
rounders too.
We're like, yeah, exactly. We're like any random person can go online and then end up winning the whole tournament. And the big takeaway there was not just that anybody could do it; it's that anybody could leverage technology to see tens of thousands of hands kind of all at once, or at least over a much shorter period of time that it takes the old guy to get there. So I respect anybody who's had reps. I'm not saying that my decision is going to be different than his, and anybody who's been doing underwriting forever, I'm not even saying that they're doing much wrong. It's at best just a couple % difference between what our models can come up with versus what a good seasoned underwriter could do. It's just at this point we can get to the answers so much faster without needing all of those reps.
And I want to pay attention to the statistics and data and what's working, what makes a profitable agency, what makes a profitable small business. Like I want to pay attention to the details. And then I do appreciate, and kind of a nerdy one, but growing up, like not with a cell phone, whatever else, just being able to read a room, being a little latchkey kid that can kind of, check the person across the table and have an idea. You're going to be wrong. You're going to be fooled. But it's fun combining those forces,
For sure.
Yeah.
I used to tell people that, and I'm sure I use a different number all the time, but the point is that the majority, whether 80, 90% of what my job was in sports was to tell people that Michael Jordan was good at basketball. I don't mean just Michael Jordan. The point is of course, most of it, if I said that the Patriots back in 2007 were predicted to win over any team, no one would be like, wow, big surprise. Of course, data is usually confirming what we know. The advantages are speed and removing the bias that is that extra couple %.
Yeah, no, and as we're kind of winding down, it's been super fascinating and fun. I always love that Jordan said there was like 10 other guys as athletic as him, and he blamed it kind of between the ears. I'm always a little bit of I'll call it the chase for the toughness and the interesting. And then I love the Moneyball, like you're just adding up runs. It doesn't matter how you get there, like just get on base, whatever else, like what are those reps? What's that consistency? It'll be fun. I think humans aren't being pulled out of the equation. I think the data is going to make it more efficient. And I really appreciate the way you kind of broke down the use of data, today.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up, so SimplyBind, check it out with Coterie, always making things more interesting, quicker. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Paul. It's really fun. How should people chase you down, or what should they check out on your guys' side?
Yeah, CoterieInsurance.com. If you do go to Coterie.com, you'll learn a lot about diapers, but you won't learn about insurance. So I got to recommend that people go to that. You can check me out on LinkedIn. Paul Bessier is my name, especially if you want to know more background, and feel free to reach out.
Cool. I appreciate it, Paul. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.